the situation is.
Push hard. Push quite hard on it. Swap.
The situation hasn't changed. There is no funding allocated to doing that. So the bridge itself is a heritage bridge. So we went through the process that we're all familiar with in terms of the other side of the bridge, but we have not made any application or proposed to make any application to make changes to the other side of the bridge. We are looking at ongoing maintenance and what the requirements are for that, and we'll continue to maintain it, which includes obviously cleaning and sweeping and those activities as well that need to take place.
Thank you. So the Mayor has asked me to follow up with that, and it's been mentioned in here for 6 months at least, and we appreciate that the bridge is a heritage bridge, but the other side of it is a heritage bridge ends at least, and that was able to be painted. So we'd like to maybe have a discussion with you later about what process we might need to put in place to have a proposal at least put forward and considered for the other side to be painted to match the new part.
We can take that conversation with that. Yep.
Great, thank you. And the last question that I have is directed to Mr. Wilson. Thank you for joining us, and it's on page 9 with respect to the status of the various alternatives to the Rootney Road cycleway. I don't need the answer now. It's in paper 19319 and the second paragraph. So I'm just trying to get to understand what the time frame is or what the status of that report is. It tells me you're looking at 5 alternatives. So I just wondered when we can expect to hear about that.
Thanks through you, Madam Chair. We're still working with the NZTA on the business cases as it goes down Wainui Road and all of the other alternatives that are there. So I'll have to follow that up with the team and come back to the committee on a date for that.
Do you think it would be reasonable to expect something for the March meeting, which is the next formal meeting of NZTA? I mean, RL2. We'll put it in on the action sheet, as Kohiri's suggesting.
Through you, Madam Chair, we'll definitely have something by March. I am aware that there is an update going to the Operations Committee around Crawford Road and the physical works that we'll be looking to carry out through procurement early start of next year and then physical works later in past June 2020.
Right, thank you very much. Are there any further questions from the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you, Councillor Akahara-Brown.
Just note that a discussion, sorry, I was trying to find the page. I highlighted a number of the similar questions that you have just asked, Madam Chair. But the warrant of fitness facilities on the East Coast prior to Christmas, have those been set in play as 2 prior to Christmas to expect them now? Or it's on page 10, I believe. Yes, page 10, first bullet point. Council is looking at setting up warrant of fitness facilities on the East Coast prior to Christmas.
Through the chair, so I'm a road safety educator, thank you. He's currently working with Graham McLean on that aspect as well. Di will be in later into this meeting. They are working on that at the moment, but I can't answer that right now, but I can definitely come back to you.
Any further questions? No. No further questions, Councillor. Can you push your button?
Just to let everyone know, the Waipu garage has just reopened and they have a qualified category.
Right, that's good news. So we had a mover and a seconder. No, I'm not sure I put the minutes, did I? So I'll put those minutes for adoption, which are the minutes of the 5th of September. All those in favour say aye. Contrary carried. Thank you. The next item is the governance work plan. And I have suggested just by email, and we won't necessarily finalise it now, that we ought to be having a couple more meetings during the year, particularly so that we can be more up to date with what's happening and hopefully create an environment that encourages the interest group specialists that sit around the table to retain an interest and know that matters that are important to their industry are going to be discussed. So while we've got the work plan and we presume dates are going to be set in the new timetable, which we don't have in front of us, but will look similar to this, I would like to suggest that council officers go away and look at a couple more meetings in that April and July gap. But is there any other matter from the government's work plan that anyone wishes to raise? No? Right, we move then to the first item on the agenda, and that is the appointment of Regional Transport Committee Deputy Chairperson. And I would like to move that Councillor Burdett be the Deputy Chairperson. Is there a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Akahara-Brown. In the absence of much further discussion, unless you have another nomination, I will put the recommendation. We note the content of the report. This is on page 13. Appoint Councillor Burdett to be the Deputy Chair. All those in favour, please raise our hand. Oh, I was assuming that you might accept it. Would you like to? Are you available?
Yes.
Okay, there's a division, so those with a vote, please raise their hand. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Burdett, who has a passionate interest in roading, I know, and covers probably more of it every day than most of us. We move to item 19.385, the heavy vehicle freight routes. Thank you very much. Ms Noble is going to speak to that.
Oh, no, we're good. Kia ora tātou. So this is the initial start of looking at route options for freight to and through the city to the port. We have engaged WSP, formerly known as WSP Opus, to undertake some initial work for us. Unfortunately, the consultant who was due to present was unable to make it at the last minute, so I am standing in his stead. And Sally McIntosh, who's been working on this report, is actually in Wellington attending a transport special interest group, so she's also not here. So I will do my best.
Can we just ask a general question? Because I presume we have people in the room who are also interested in the document. There are a number of pages which are yet to be completed.
That's right.
So what is the process? We're receiving a level of the report. It'll not be finalised until after the presentation with the RTC is what it tells me, but then there is further through some pages where the whole page is absent. So can you?
Yes, so this is an initial draft. This is the chance for RTC to provide feedback on the contents of the report, whether you're happy with the concept of the multi-criteria assessment, whether you think there's anything that we need to go back to the consultant with and ask is added, something taken away. And then the consultant will work through those comments and finalise the report. And we will then, depending on the steer from RTC and council, develop a communications and engagement plan, talking with the community, stakeholders, iwi and hapu, and further refine the findings. So this is the very start of the process. So we're being quite open and transparent and coming to RTC early, rather than coming with something that's a fait accompli.
Just a question in terms of just the decision-making process here, because my understanding is this is a council decision, it's not an RTC decision. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's why the recommendations refer to recommending to council. So this is a chance for RTC to have their.
I think that it's really important. We absolutely support the work, so we think it's a really important piece of work. But we just want to be really clear: it is the council decision. Secondly, there does need to be a consultation with the transport agency. This is not the forum for that. So there needs to be quite substantial consultation engagement through the process from here.
Absolutely.
I mean, I wouldn't normally do this, but it just seems rather an interesting stage of the document. And I see we've got representatives of the heavy transport industry and the port. Can I just ask Mr. Gaddam, have you seen the document? Because I'm looking at page 54 and at 10.4 it says port access options and assessment. And I'm just wondering, I may as well ask you since you're in the room, have you seen the document or have you been invited to make comment? Thank you. At least you have it. Thanks very much. Thanks. Thank you. Before or after Ms Noble's presented, would you like to let Ms Noble present? Now we've got to understand and then we can comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's see if the technology works. Excellent. So this is just an overview of what the presentation's about. Again, just to reiterate, this wasn't put together by me, so apologies if I don't do the presentation justice. So it just goes over the background, the routes that have been assessed, the assessment criteria process, the criteria used, how they're weighted, the sort of interim results, and some other considerations and potential next steps. That's from the consultant's perspective, just to highlight that. So why did we undertake this work? Why did we commission it? So there have been sort of several drivers. There has been sort of some calls from the community to provide some certainty about where heavy vehicles will be routed through the city, and particularly as they make their way to the port. We need to, as a council, prepare our planning for our long-term plan and our regional land transport plan, both of which are projects coming up shortly. So we need to make some decisions as a council about what works we want done, what capital works we need done, what our maintenance costs are going to look like, so we can do all that planning work. And also to help us target and support funding requests for capital projects in relation to NZTA's work and state highways. So obviously, if we continue down this path, there is a lot more work to be done. This is just the beginning of the journey. We need to look a bit further to teasing out, is there a problem? What is that problem? Looking at things like current freight numbers, projected freight numbers, maintenance costs, safety. So this is the very beginning of the journey. And it's a chance to take stock of all the work that's already been done. This isn't the first time that this has been looked at, but we never seem to have really reached a conclusion. So it's really trying to get to that point where council either makes a decision to choose some heavy vehicle routes or makes a decision not to. You know, those options are both available. So first overview. So this is the area that the study is primarily looking at. So it's looking at routes into the port. So the first bit of the assessment looks at routes coming along State Highway 2 and comparing the Back Ormond route versus the State Highway 2 route, and also connections between Back Ormond Road and the State Highway. And you see Kings Road, Harper Road, and then a looping up round to State Highway are all considered. Hopefully you have a colour version of the map, otherwise it's a bit hard
No, we do.
Yeah, to differentiate. So that was the first part that the consultant looked like, and in terms of how they assessed the different routes, they used a multi-criteria assessment, and they've looked across the 4 well-being, so we're economic, social, cultural, environmental, and under those headings there are sub-criteria. The report from the consultant, which is an appendix in your agenda, goes into some more detail about how those different criteria were scored. It uses a 7-point scale, so the higher the score, the more positive the impact is seen to be. And I would just note there that looking at those criteria, there are some that need further engagement to tease out further. For example, the cultural criteria isn't particularly well defined. It just refers to cultural sites that are identified in the Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan, which is not the be-all and end-all of impacts on cultural values. So it is a qualitative assessment, just to note that as well. And that just reflects the diverse nature of the information that the consultant was using to form an assessment. You know, some things it's easy to put numbers on, like costs, others very hard. So the consultant performed the assessment, giving sort of an equal, giving an equal weighting to each of the sub-criteria, but then also looking at how you change that weighting, so whether you put more importance on different values, how that changed the overall outcome of which route is preferred. And if we continue on down this route, that's another decision council can make or not make, is whether to weight certain well-beings or certain sub-criteria when making its decision. It also gives a good idea how the outcome can be altered by placing weight, how sensitive the outcome is to the value you place on certain well-beings. So the results for that particular piece of assessment. So overall, the recommended route was Harper Road and then using State Highway 2. It does have the highest cost, and that's associated with the upgrade of Harper Road. I believe there's a bridge that needs strengthening. There is money available, I understand, under the PGF, and we're going through the business case process at the moment, and there is an update in one of the later reports on the agenda on the business case process. It is slightly longer than using State Highway 2 alone, shorter than State Highway 2 alone, slightly longer than using Kings Road by 0.8 kilometres. And then we moved on to the port access routes. So that's how heavy freight actually gets to the port. There are upgrades needed for all routes. Map. So just to explain those routes there, there's Port Access 1 is using Harini and State Highway 35 or Wainui Road. PA1B is using Crawford Road and State Highway 35, and then the last option C is sort of a dual option where the heavy freight can use both routes. There was I guess a stronger preference when you looked at the results from this assessment, and that was for Harini and the State Highway option. So working through this process, there are some other considerations. If council did decide to restrict heavy vehicle to one route or another route, how would that be achieved? Would it be by a formal regulation such as a bylaw? Would it be just incentivizing particular routes, making them more attractive to use for heavy vehicles? Are there then associated costs with that freight moving to other local road routes that hadn't been anticipated? We're looking at the moment, and Mr. Hadfield touched on it, about the projected logbook volumes and where those will be coming from over the next few years. So we know that there is forestry at Hokoroa Road that may be coming down Waimata Valley Road, but there is some uncertainty at the moment about that route. And then looking at options to make the state highway routes more attractive to heavy freight, thereby alleviating any need for regulation. So next steps. So once we've received, as we've already discussed, feedback from the Regional Transport Committee, then we can start feeding that into the report. We can start talking with our stakeholders and the iwi and the community. And depending on that feedback and the feedback we get today, then move on further through the process and talk to council about how they want to approach this and what they would like to do.
Thank you. A question to Ms Noble. Councillor Burdett.
Well, this is almost replicate what we did 21 years ago. The council I'm talking about, almost identical, only different people, different time. It resulted in us going to see the mayor and I going to see the shopkeepers along Highway 35, going to talk to the people out at Harper's Road and Kings Road. But good on them, this is a good report. It's a step in the right direction. One of the issues that came out of this was in the time of Bill Turner as the manager of engineering works. We closed the other side of Harini Road and there was supposed to be an underbridge put in place that never eventuated. Since then, there's been a huge volume of logs, build up of traffic, and we've wrestled to try and do something about it. So well done to those who put this together. Let's hope there's some action on it in time.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Brad. I do have a question. I mean, it does concern Crawford Road, because there was a heavy vehicle restriction on Crawford Road at one point of time, and now there's not. And I don't know when it changed, And I know there's a lot of Crawford Road residents that are not happy at present with the activity that's happening in that particular area with the volume and the times of all night and the speed actually. So yeah, I would like to know when that transition of it not being well, it being allowed to be a heavy vehicle route changed. And I'm looking at the proposal for the future and not seeing that it's not a preferred option. And the other question will, when will those residents in that area be appeased by not having the trucks going down that area?
Mr Wilson, thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to clarify, there's never been a restriction of heavy vehicles down Crawford Road. There's been an agreement between heavy vehicle users and I understand the port from a long way back around not using Crawford Road. So there is no bylaw or anything in place to restrict heavy vehicles from using Crawford Road. There never has been.
It's perception rather than a reality.
Madam.
Councillor Akahara-Brown.
No.
I guess following on from that, thank you, Joe, for doing justice to what you've got in front of you there, is how important are residents, ratepayers in the space of these reports, as per the industries that, you know, we're trying to balance up and create spaces of good movement of heavy vehicles through our region, which, as Councillor Burdett has noted, has been lots of discussions and a long time coming, and we're still sitting in the point of what to do in this space. And for me, a little bit, you know, concerned about the social notes in there, the social implications, of course, but how are we balanced out as far as residents? Crawford Road has a significant number of people living on it, as does other routes. So where do we make sure we are ensuring that their residential rights as ratepayers are absolutely heard? And also a couple other things. We have had a number of interested groups come to this particular committee to talk about heavy bypass. So where are they within the report spaces? Their views, their thoughts. Chris Shaw came in with significant evidence and very learned, highly researched, and where do they feature? Phil Gork, Roger, there were a number of residents that have been quite invested, and I just felt that was one thing I highlighted throughout the report, is where do they feature? Are we giving them their hearing, I guess, and validating their input? But for me, overall, I still see we're not quite there yet, and how are we ensuring we get a good balance with these reports? Do it.
So as discussed at the beginning of this piece, this is the beginning of the journey and we haven't gone out to that wider engagement yet. I think the criteria do allow for those matters to be considered, but what we haven't done is engage with the community and others to get their feedback on what the weighting should be, whether we've missed anything. And in terms of when you put your council hat on, there is the opportunity to place different weight on different aspects. So if council decided, for example, that the social impact was particularly important, then greater weight could be placed on that through the multi-criteria analysis and assessment process.
Oh, sorry, supplementary, I had written down spatial planning. Council's undertaking that, as you well know. Where does this feature in that space? And obviously there are crossovers in all ways to do with our spatial planning. So is that taken into account too?
Absolutely. So you'll see through the report, the consultant has made reference to the spatial plan, particularly in terms of potential future changes in terms of residential areas, density of housing, amenity and the like. The implementation plan for the spatial plan will be picking up on sort of some of the next steps as short-term actions.
Right, I've just got a couple more questions. Ms. Spate, do you want to make any comment at this time?
Yes, thank you. As I said before, we strongly support this in terms of making strategic investment in the transport network, and particularly in the intersections and the supporting infrastructure and safe routes through the city and around the city. This is really important to do. It's very difficult to make really good long-term investment in this sort of infrastructure without this. So we really strongly support it. It is really important, and while there's been quite a bit of reflection in the report on the relative cost to the council, or if it's on a local road or a state highway, there are still significant costs if we do make a preferred road that goes to a state highway. So those are things that we do need to be able to actively participate in the conversation and take part in. And then we'll be in a, I think, much better position for this region to be able to design and invest in the right infrastructure, including some of those key intersections, and take into account safety for vulnerable users. So we're really strongly supportive of the work continuing and engaging. And this is a difficult decision. These are always really challenging decisions, and so that engagement and the participation of the parties is really important.
Yeah, I'm just looking back to see what the recommendations are, because I don't think that 3 elected councillors and 2 in the room, but we don't have a vote, really should be making any choices, and that was alluded to at the beginning of the presentation. So, but I think the recommendations do allow, if we amend the item 3. But I've just got one other note. I felt that the assessment framework, and that's on page 32 in the economic box, is actually doesn't consider the cost benefit to business in the sub-criteria. So it talks about transport performance, capital cost and maintenance costs, but the cost benefit of a particular route ought to be a consideration in the economic sub-criteria, please. Apart from that, I think we'll obviously, council will have a lot more discussion, and I wouldn't think council will want to be making any final decision until it's actually gone out to the community, and the industries and other users given the opportunity. Cycling, roadways, everyone is given the opportunity to feed into this, but we do need to keep it moving. Yes. Yes, and counts was say. The recommendations for this paper are on page 16, which seems fairly safe. So it's to note the content of the report and the assessment in attachment 1, approve the approach taken in the options assessment. We've made a minor amendment, and then recommend that council agree to pursue or not a preferred heavy vehicle freight route. I don't think we're in a position to agree or not even at the moment with the limited amount of information we've got. So we recommend that council continue the process. So something to that effect. Ms. Akahara-Brown, are you happy with that? I'm just going to come up with something. Continue the process of consultation and investigation with respect to a preferred heavy vehicle route, which leaves it wide open for much more information to be made available. You were intimating that you would be prepared to move, Councillor Burdett. Are you happy to second? Thank you, Councillor Akahara-Brown. All those in favour? Aye. Contrary carried. Don't hold your breath. Yes. Thank you. I'd now like to welcome other visitors that came into the room, and I apologise that you needed to come in quietly, but council has actually quite formal processes around how it runs its meetings. So we had started that paper before you arrived, so we needed to continue the paper, but at least it gave you the opportunity to see how council functions in here on behalf of the ratepayers. So thank you very much for joining us. And I understand that you have an interest in, I'm just finding it, the report of the Chief Executive for information, which is around 11.4, the road safety campaign. Is that correct? What are we going to do? Well, yes, that's what Heather asked me. Ms. Conn, would you just make clear what the process is, please? Thank you. I'll just pull up the page. So with the forbearance of the committee, it's item 11 on page 85. Is it? Is it? No. Yes, I thought they all, yes, but they fall under all of the chief executive's reports as well. So it's 11.4 on page 119, which is the road safety campaign. And Ms. Akarang is here with us. Thank you very much. And interested members of the public, welcome and thank you. So over to you for your presentation.
Kia ora koutou katoa. For those that don't know me, my name's Diana Karangi and I'm the road safety educator for the Gisborne District Council. I work alongside these awesome people behind me and together we make up the Journeys team. Just a little bit about my role. My role involves developing and implementing activities that address the safe use of land transport network. This includes safety promotion, advertising and education. But a huge part of my mahi is also working with communities to identify and address local safety issues. Ka pai. So just want to give you a brief snapshot of what's happening in our community. Oh yeah, too blind for that one. So as you may know, Tairāwhiti have some of the worst statistics in New Zealand. And when we compare ourselves to the 61 other regions across New Zealand, we're right up there in the top 10, number 9 to be exact. And when we look at our crash data informs us that we have huge issues when it comes to drinking driving or drink driving, speeding, loss of control on rural roads, and also we have lots of whānau that don't wear our restraints. When we delve a little bit deeper into these statistics, and when we start to look at who's doing what in terms of gender, age, and ethnicity, it starts to paint a picture of who we start to focus on. So in terms of drinking and driving, it's our males that are doing it, age 16 to 24. But then we've got this other group, the 35s to 55-year-olds coming up the ranks. Who's doing it? Māori are doing it, Māori males. And I suppose if you have a look at our stats up there, what stands out to you? Māori males. All right, so they're our targets. If we take just drinking and driving and we look at the statistics just from this year and our crashes that we've had, from January to October of this year, we've had 2 fatals, 29 serious crashes and 73 minor crashes. So in terms of my mahi, I'm trying to reduce these statistics here. How do we do that? We do them through education and campaigns, just like this one's here. One moment in time. I want to take this opportunity to invite Hiram up here. One moment in time has been inspired by this guy here. I'm going to actually call his whānau up as well because we know that we need his whānau behind him in order for him to heal. So kia ora, Hiram.
Bring the chair over. Sorry, don't worry about it. Move slide underneath.
Tēnā kānei katoa. Ko tēnei rangi ne maunga. Ko rawa nui anu matua te awa. Ko hanaita te waka. Ko Ngāti Pātupane te hapu. Ko tēnā whioro te marae. Ko hauati te marae. Ko taitaka hauati te iwi. Ko harampaya take ingoa. Tēnā kātai, tēnā kātai, tēnā kātai kauru. Kia ora, my name is Hiram Paya. Due to my injury, I had to leave from here. I am from Tonga Bay, but I lived in Gisborne while going to intermediate and Boyd High School. When I was younger, I used to really enjoy playing rugby and hanging out with the boys. I worked hard and when I extra, but also internally being messed up and used to drink a lot of alcohol and smoke cigarettes and marijuana. One, I was like you. But a week before I turned 16, my life changed in a dramatic way. One night when I decided to go home to Tonga Bay, I met up with a family. We were smoking and drinking a lot. I ended up running around Tonga Bay on the back of a flatbed truck. And when I'm a bump and I fell off, causing my injury. I don't remember much else, but I've been told that next minute I was in a helicopter flying to Gisborne Hospital. Then I was flown across country to Waikato Hospital and then Auckland Hospital. I spent 1 year in AMI rehab before I could come back to Gisborne. My accident caused a severe traumatic brain injury. Since my accident, I have had to learn how to walk and talk again, learn how to eat, and learn how to do almost everything for myself again. It had taken a long time, but I have worked hard and can now walk again all by myself and be independent with my personal care. I wouldn't change anything about the things that have happened to me, because this has made me who I am. And I feel it has made me a better person and appreciate the things around me more. But if I could go back and give myself one piece of advice, I would tell myself to stay in school. That it's possible to have fun without drinking alcohol, and that you don't have to drink to have fun or fit in. Just be yourself. I would also tell myself that if you are a passenger, you are just as responsible for drink driving if you get in the car with a driver who has been drinking alcohol. Here's a poem I wrote 2 years ago. One moment in time, one moment that haunts my mind, one moment I cannot change, one moment that caused a tragic exchange. For good or bad, I cannot tell. For it forever hold me in a spell. For the thing I feared and dreaded most, for now has become my greatest boast. Through dark places of black despair, I now live and hope without crippling fear. Through God's grace, love, and kindness, I've been set free to fly like a dove. Through the endless realm of what I can be, I now see a future of untold possibilities. Amen. I would also like to share a whakataking with you. Mā te rongo ka mohio, mā te mohio ka manama, mā te manama ka mātou, mā te mātou ka ora. Through listening comes awareness. Through awareness comes understanding. Through understanding comes knowledge. Through knowledge comes life and well-being. I've got to burn on a while. Ka whiti mai te rā, ki te moana, huri atu nei, tini langi maunga, kore ana, mai wā manu me, e karanga e oho, kua awatea, he pū manawa, o te iwi e, ko te aikanga, hauati, o te kania pakinai, ko awa nui anua, matua te awa, e lele atua, kia panga noa, hei ono ono tanga a mauri, ki me taha wainua, taha tinana, he pūmanawa, o te iwi e, ko te aikama, a haumati, o me kania pakina, a whiti mai te rā, ki te moana, huri atu nei, pini langi maunga, kōrere ana, mai mā manu e, e karanga e o, kua awatea, e karanga e o, kua awatea. Te pūmanawa, hai, ha, hea rei. Tēnā kanga, tēnā kanga, kia mai, tātai katoa.
Kia ora koutou. I just want to take you, kia ora koutou. I just want to take you back in time to the night that this all happened. Maybe not. Aroha mai whānau, there's no sound today, but I'm sure that if you go to www.onemomentintime, you'll be able to check out that information there. So this is our campaign that we launched in October of Labour Weekend. As you can see from the reports, we got a huge response from whānau, and that's the way that we want to actually go going forwards. We want all of our advertising to be local. We feel that more people notice it, and that's what we're trying to aim for, our own whānau, to recognise what's happening in our community. So you'll see all the billboards that are up, both in English and Te Reo Māori. We have ads running on the local Māori stations, radio stations, as well as My FM. And we have Facebook, Instagram, all those digital media promotions happening. So kia ora koutou katoa.
Thank you. Can we just ask a few questions, perhaps?
Sure, to me or Hiram.
Thank you very much for coming this afternoon and giving us that presentation. We do really appreciate it. You've said on the report on page 121, next actions, a second video will be released. Is that
Yeah, that's right. So last weekend, we took Hiram to the streets. So we were actually a part of of the booze bus operation and checkpoints that happened on Saturday night. So we're looking forward to seeing that footage, and that will be released in Christmas and New Year's. Yeah, focusing on our drink drivers.
And when is where exactly is the concert on the East Coast, which is mentioned again in item 21?
Oh, the Lean On Me concert is happening in Ruatoria on the 14th of December.
Are there any further questions? Any questions from the committee to Mr. Pyer?
Just
Council Officer?
one question from me, and that was amazing. And thank you very much for coming in and sharing your story with us. It's really very strong, very moving story, and amazing kind of support as well. So thank you for that. In terms of the campaign itself, are you working with our road safety campaign people in Wellington?
We haven't on this one. We've gone by the guidelines. I'm very familiar with those guidelines. Yeah, no, we've been working with them on other projects. So.
Yeah, so I think it would be a really good one to just keep linking in with them.
Yeah, for sure.
And we can learn from your experience and also feed that into the body of knowledge around road safety, what works and how to access and target different communities. So I think it's a really important connection to keep really strong. Thank you.
Councillor Aka Haka-Brown.
Kia ora whānau, thank you Hiram for that. What can you say after that really? You're very inspiring, and it is great to have you take a lead role in obviously a huge issue, not just in our region, but of course our nation, especially with our young Māori men. So I'm wanting to ask whether you'd be interested in a community advisor's position. We're going to be appointing or asking or discussing the framework of that, and your story is very profound in a lot of areas, etc. And I would like to see it used in a campaign and then we move on. I think there's a lot more power to be expressed through your story. But we are looking to discuss the appointment of community advisors, which cover a host of, I guess, frameworks within transport. And so I don't want to just put it on you today, but I think you would add some real value. So Di, yeah, is that something that you would consider in this space? Of course, around access, mobility, but also the safety aspects he's raised. So.
Yeah, well, just to confirm things now, he's giving me the thumbs up, so he's in there. But yes, definitely. Hiram's campaign has it's only one story, but it's opened up like so many opportunities for others to come forward. And so that's what we're looking at doing. We've got others that have emailed because of this campaign around what happened to them around speed, their child not wearing restraints, etc. So yeah, going forward.
Oh, thank you. I guess I just want to do a shout out to Councillor Delsing. You just texted me that. So thanks, Shannon.
Either of the committee prepared to move the report, which is simply for noting on page 119. Moved Councillor Aka-Brown, seconded Councillor Burdett. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. I'll just go and thank Diana. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hmm? doesn't matter today because of the time frame, but it could matter. Particularly your road safety woman needs to speak, needs to be pulled into line and needs to at least discuss with you or someone.
Yeah.
Kia ora. Thank you very much indeed for the gift. Thank you. Lovely. Oh, look at this beautiful water bottle. That was not expensive. So do we pay for this?
When people go through the checkpoint, if they make it through, they get that. Obviously, if they don't make it through, they go elsewhere.
Very
But
kind. Right, back to our agenda, and after that humbling presentation. We're at page 77, item 19.382, and it's the regional land transport variation. Have I missed that one? Oh, I might have jumped 2 pages, apologies. Right, page 70, the appointment of community advisors to the Regional Transport Committee. I'm taking it that the members of the committee have read the paper, understand what it's saying, that this council has continued to want to have and have value in participants from the community sitting on the Regional Transport Committee. But you note the recommendations are either appoint or does not appoint, and subject to 2A agrees that a council representative appointed to the Regional Transport Committee have the delegation to interview and select community advisors. Do you want to, is there any comment you'd like to make?
Probably the only comment is, obviously, we have the portfolios listed from last term. If there are any changes sought to those portfolios, now would be the time to raise that.
It depends on whether it's someone. Economic development in the last term was covered by an economic development person, and the heavy transport industry wasn't actually covered specifically. Now, they can be covered in the economic development aspect of it, but they weren't specifically represented. And since heavy transport has a significant impact on our roads, I'm seeking some guidance from a couple of Daves over there, both of whom are looking at their papers, not at me. Can we extend an invitation to the heavy transport industry specifically, or otherwise we need to choose more carefully the economic development representative? And I'm seeking some advice and guidance.
Through you, Madam Chair, there's a couple of options that we can go away and look at as for good representation. The Eastland Wood Council only represent the wood industry, so they don't have the likes of Farmers Transport or necessarily Halls Transport, some of the other transport companies. There is a Heavy Vehicle Industry Association. We can approach them if they have anybody. For the committee's just clarification, in the last round, Steve Breen was put forward as somebody who would come on behalf of economic development. So he was supposed to represent part of the heavy vehicle industry, which is why he was there on behalf of Activate Tairāwhiti. But we're more than happy to go away and look at coming back with a suitable representation.
Well, I do think we need the heavy transport industry represented better than they were in the past. And I wonder whether the port has an interest specifically, or whether they can be seen to be captured by economic development. I saw that. Thank you. Ms. Bate.
I sit on a number of RTCs, and we have a range of different arrangements in terms of community engagement and representatives. And so one of the things that we've discussed is the importance of the agenda actually identifying the opportunities for those representatives to provide input and advice, and also contribute to the strategic conversation. And this is a really important year for the strategic discussion around the Regional Land Transport Plan. So I do think this is a really important conversation for us to really bringing in those key voices for this region. So in other committees, we have, for example, in the Hawke's Bay, we have a Mana Whenua representative, we have a port representative, we have Kiwi Rail there as well, we have a heavy vehicle sector representative. We also have the police. So we do have a range, and it varies by different ones in the Wanganui-Nauru region. We also have an active modes representative for walking and cycling. So it is about what's important for this region, and also then thinking about how they would participate in both the formal RTC, but potentially workshops that we might have as we really start to explore some of those key themes that might be important for the next RLTP.
I think that's one of those good suggestions. Our cultural interests captured mana whenua to a degree, but it seems to me that we should be asking council to support any recommended changes that we might want to make, and both heavy transport and active modes could be added to. We've got access and mobility, but that was actually more around those requiring access and disability. And CCS have been in contact with the mayor already, telling her that they would like to be around the table. So there is interest. So is it generally, thank you, Councillor Alcantara-Brown, happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Emma, for that too, because I guess for me, having noted the attendance and per the agenda, but I had, in my view, seen those voices were pertinent to the strategic visioning for the region, hence the reason for them being at this table. So perhaps being clear to the terms of reference for those members. But I'm very heartened to hear that other RTCs do have rail, because I think it's really important that whilst in one of the reports the viable most road use is heavy truck vehicle, when there is some work being done in that space for our region. So I would be obviously advocating that maybe it's my interest as well as many others, that we did have other modal transport support. Makes sense simply because it's a huge user traffic industry wise, as well as it's looking at some options that are a part of future plans. But I would also like to consider our young people who, again, we know that it's important that we have them voicing their future thoughts and aspirations. And so we've got a lot of our young people in this region, talking around the notion of climate change by all means, but certainly active users of transport, be it better use of the public transport systems that they want to use for mitigation against climate change, but also cycling walkways have become a strategic framework for this region. So I would like to see that our discussion to this would be broader in its context, but absolutely ensure that those people feel valued at this space, and it's not just simply filling a seat. So because I never really got to know the mana whenua space, gentlemen, in this time frame. I do think the access mobility, we're looking at an older generation, they need to be heard and felt that their transport concerns are met, and of course environmental. So there were a couple of ones in the interest groups I felt were helpful. Obviously the police is a big help, but certainly rail, to me, I'd like to see it be a very broader and encompassing, I guess, of all regional transport as per our long-term plans.
Thank you, Councillor Alcantara-Brown. Councillor Burdett, did you have any comment to make?
We really need some movers and shakers on this career from within the district.
I quite agree.
People that count, come here and tell us as it really is.
Right.
That's where we should go.
So you mean some long distance road users?
Well, the city hub requires business, requires economic development. That's what pays for the rest.
Yes, it does.
So all I'm saying is, we should choose wisely. Sure, those kind of people don't want to come to meetings anyway.
No, and they won't come to meetings if the meetings are boring, and that seemed to be what happened in the last few months of for everyone's information, you've got in your agenda the attendance. So we want to stimulate the role of this committee so that we see that the meetings are of value, that we can get good participation from our community reps. So with the inclusion of heavy transport specifically, mana whenua and active modes of transport, and potentially rail. I only hesitate to mention rail, Councillor Arkota-Brown, because I'm perfectly aware that with all the bells and whistles, not one train has been on the railway line from Napier to Wairoa since the opening, apart from the opening day. So, you know, how realistic is all of that money that was spent on that particular piece of the railway line, which I might ask you about later. So I'm not sure about rail here.
And I'm not going to take anyone's kudos away. It's a well constructed.
So you're supporting Councillor Arkota-Brown and having rail on this committee? Great. Okay, that clears that up. So the recommendations are on page 71, and I think we're saying we appoint community advisors to the Regional Land Transport Committee, and we recommend to council that this committee has a delegation to interview and select community advisors to the Regional Transport Committee.
Madam Chair, can I just note, I guess in my role, in my considerations, that the advisors, so as Councillor Budet's noted, we do need to ensure those people carry with them, I guess, a set amount of knowledge around the regional transport plans, etc. We're not just choosing people. I've just noted Hiram's story has profound impact in an area we're trying to lessen the deaths on our roads of Māori men. So I think it's important that panel, that we know that the people who we are putting up for these community advisements are actually people that understand this role, this committee, and also feel valued by what they can advise on. I sensed in some parts there was some that didn't kind of understand that, but I do believe it's important to have it broadens our scope, of course. It brings into us new knowledge or more knowledge, so I see value in it, but it would be certainly pertinent that they would understand some of if they've got some heads up on the government policy statement that's currently out. So maybe there's some training required. A little bit of intel, I guess, it's always going to be helpful. Understanding the NZTA's role, and so I think there's some key competence that would need to be in play, as well as not just expecting them to show up.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. And in B, interview and select the community advisors, then we would have that opportunity at that time, Councillor Arkota. So are we happy with that process, that they'll be advertised with suitable framing around the advertisement? I'll put that then. You moved, Councillor Arkota-Brown, and Councillor Budet seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. Yes, right. We're now at 77. Thank you. The Regional Land Transport Plan variation for state highway speed management. I'd like to speak to that, Ms. Spain. Okay.
So it's a report from council staff, but the request was received from NZTA to undertake a variation to the Regional Land Transport Plan. So we've set out the process that needs to be followed, which is that the committee adopts the variation and then that is submitted to council for approval. Ms. Spate may well have more of the detail around what the variation is and why it is needed. But in summary, it's to introduce a new NZTA activity to the programme of works outlined in the Regional Land Transport Plan. It's not seen as a significant change because within the framework of the RLTP, it is a relatively small amount of money. Budget's already provided or will be provided, and that there will be a consultation and engagement process as part of the highway speed management process in any case. So
just want to make it really clear, all this is doing is agreeing to a variation being put into the plan. It's not agreeing to the variation, because we don't know what the variation is going to be. So it's a process.
It's not agreeing to vary any speed limits or make any...
Agreeing to a process.
Yeah, but it's agreeing to put the process, the activity of looking at speed management into the RLTP.
I think the most important thing here is that this, looking at speed and having a really strong, consistent framework for speed in the way that we consider it and look at it at a regional level is really, really important. Speed has such an overwhelming impact on the outcome of any crash on our state highway network and local road network. So what this is actually a really important part of our whole land transport safety system. And we're obviously working currently in consultation with State Highway 35, but this goes much broader and allows us to look at all roads in the region in a really consistent frame, so that we create a network that looks and feels appropriate for the roads and the states.
I'm just concerned that this, once it's reported, could appear that we've agreed the variation. So I'm trying to come up with some words that make it really clear. All this process is about is agreeing to a process that will ultimately potentially provide a variation. I don't want it to look like we have agreed to the variation and our public have not been able to be consulted. Sure. Thank you, Councillor Burdett. No, yes, certainly.
I've got a ring. I'm a very prominent East Coast resident who, in his own eyes, has plenty of money, and he gave me a real flea in the ear. Totally concurred with plans for just out here. Past Tarapori in terms of the camping season, totally agreed with Tapuia. As for the rest, I won't repeat what he actually said, but look, if you're going to go down this road, you need to talk to people. You need to get out there and just really get some information. The chair's right. I'm just wondering if we tacitly approve what the recommendations are here, if this is the start of a rocky road to reducing speed everywhere.
It's just that the language needs to be tidied up to make it really clear. It's only the process that we're embarking on of a potential variation. I mean, it is a variation, beg your pardon, it's a variation to the transport plan, but it's a potential change to traffic speed.
So this is the activity.
Yes, we understand.
Not the decision. And there's a really clear process here. So what we do, there are 3 steps to that process. So the first one is engagement. So if we're talking about State Highway 35, we're currently in engagement on the open roads from Gisborne to Tapuia, and we've yet to start that process from Tapuia to Opotiki. Now, engagement is not when we have any proposal to do anything. It's when we're saying, what does the community think about this road and its speed? And what is the information that we might need to think about in terms of making any decision to raise, lower or retain the speeds on that corridor? So that's a really important step, because there's all sorts of things from the location of marae and urupa to attractions for tourists or for locals, scenic points, all those sorts of things, farm access and so on. When we've been through that process, and including the analysis and assessment that the Transport Agency does, we go to what's called consultation, which is when we put out, as we have on the Gisborne to Tapuia Townships proposals, is we propose to make these changes, and again we go back formally to the community and say, please give us your feedback. This is part of a legally constituted process, and we take all that into account in coming to a final decision, and then we actually change the speeds, and we do the associated work. So sometimes if we lower speeds, we need to do other things to change how that road looks and feels, to encourage compliance and to give people the visual cues that this is a lower speed environment. And those are things like gateways to particular settlements. It might be raised islands, safe, safe crossing spots, pavements on either side of the road and things like that. So there's quite a process that follows before any actual decision happens, and those are set down quite clearly, and we're required by law to follow those processes. So this is about saying that the activity is included in our plan, and then the processes themselves will be carried out in accordance with those steps. So your constituent will have the opportunity to engage on that open road and provide feedback and input. And that includes wider things, and I've already talked to the forestry industry, for example, about what that might mean, and they were very open and engaging on both the importance of their social licence to operate and work with communities, and also the economic benefits and the access to port and so on. So those are all factors that are important and should be considered as part of the process.
Madam Chair. In terms of the two areas, Gisborne to Tupuia, Tupuia to Poraki, our boundary goes to Whangaparaoa. And we all are aware, as you are probably, that the roads are not that flash. But once you get beyond that point and start going around the top of the coast, the roads are very, very good. So how did you arrive at the decision to split it, or split the district in those two areas with your consultation?
I can't answer to that level of detail. I wasn't involved with that particular decision, but it would have been, I'm sure someone considered where was the right place to split it. But if there's a issue or something that
I think we might bring that up as a
I can-
supplementary issue, because that's about regular maintenance as well, I think, Councillor Burdett. We heard what Ms Spate told us with respect to the process, and Council, the committee understands the process, but we need to make sure we aren't, that our public are enabled to have a part to play, and we understand that there are all nights this week you are meeting and allowing people to give you feedback. However, to be clear about this, I think I'd like to see us add maybe in 2, or at, I beg your pardon, at 4, the first 4, before we recommend to council, that we note that the activity for the purposes of this plan process reflects a process of engagement and information gathering before any final decision is made. Are you happy about that? Yes, Mr Wilson.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, the recommendation to council is simply to approve that the RLGP is amended in order for NZTA to undertake this piece of work. So the consultation and those things are separate from what we're requesting the committee to do here, which is simply to recommend. So the engagement process for any NZTA process or anything is going to go ahead. We've seen the start of that. This is just to get it, this is an operational to put it into the RLGP going forward via council. So muddying the, sorry, with respect, Madam Chair, changing the recommendation for what's going to go to council, the process, I'm happy to have something around 5 with note that there will be significant consultation, maybe cleaner than the recommendation, because we can't tell New Zealand Transport Agency how to undertake its process on the state highway speeds. Even if we
I wasn't
wanted to.
fiddling with 4A. 4A was remaining. My concern is that it's what the perception is of what this process is rather than the reality. We understand what the reality is. If you're quite sure and going to take responsibility for the feedback that we may get, Mr Wilson, we won't amend the recommendation.
Madam Chair, I could not support this recommendation that this NZTA undertakes this work on the state highway. I think it's really important. We've just seen Ms Akurangi present to the council about the dangers of speed on State Highway 35 and the dangers of people driving and the issues we have with people rather than the network. So I'm more than happy to say that this will be a proper process and that to come back on me. I have no problem.
Nobody's arguing with the intent. It's actually how we capture the requirement for a variation, and so that the variation is not read as something we've agreed already. We totally agree with the intent, but so if you're quite comfortable, I'll ask my committee if they, or the committee, are you comfortable with the recommendations as they are, Councillor Akapara?
I'm comfortable with them because there isn't noted a variation speed or in the space of what Mr Wilson has just said, but for me, I guess I sense through the report, this is to ensure meeting the requirements of the government's policy statement around safety, which we constantly bring up, and in this committee we've had a number of residents come in and speak, and of course some quite emotional spaces at times. So I think if we're sending the message that this has been work undertaken based on hearing from our, and more engagement to be had, then I'm comfortable with the recommendations as they sit. I don't sense that we are making a decision on that variance and that recommendation personally, so I'm happy to move it, second it, or whatever it's been done
Thank
thus
you.
far.
After having heard those pearls of wisdom from the other side of the room, what can I do but concur? I'll second it.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded and will remain as it is. I'm perfectly clear that it's only about getting the process into the plan. I'm just not sure that all of our readers will be that clear. That's my concern. I just have one further question. We haven't put the recommendation yet. We've noted it. To separate on item 4 on page 79, we say here we're going to set, or the Transport Agency is going to separately consult Maori affected by a proposed land transport activities. How is that going to happen, please?
We've already started the consultation. We had a session in Robert Bay last night, and Waihu, Victoria, Tokyo Bay. We have been consulting for last week.
Great, thank you.
And through the chairs as well.
Thank you. I'll put that recommendation then, which appears at the top of page 78. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. Page 85, thank you.
Kia ora again. This is a very brief introduction to the regional land transport planning process. Just to say that it is happening. We have to rewrite our RLTP every 6 years and review it every 3 years. This will be a rewrite this year round. We've attached a high-level time frame. Obviously, if RTC meetings change, then we'll reflect that within the time frame, and particularly if we have additional meetings, which the chair has alluded to. And this is really just more of an introduction to the process than requiring me to make any decisions or provide any feedback at this point. Ms. McIntosh is attending, as I said, a regional transport special interest group meeting today, and one of the items for discussion is the RLTP process and introducing a more standardised approach across the country to hopefully make it easier for everyone, and particularly NZTA, who have to look at all these different RLTPs and decipher what they mean.
So that really is something for noting. Is this on prepared to move? Thank you, Councillor Brown. Seconded.
When
Thank
we
you,
see
Ms.
some
May.
detail around the proposed plan, if that.
So when we'll be coming back with some more information on what might be in the plan and priorities.
There's a time frame.
There's a time frame in the, yes, and also as an attachment to the paper, there's a time frame. Now,
In March.
so in March, we're looking at doing the initial workshop.
And May, June, sign off. Thank you. And there's a speech.
We've got a whole year.
Yeah.
We just don't want anyone to forget.
So I put that to the meeting, and it's simply a report for noting that's been moved, and Councillor Brown and second for Slate. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, carried. Thank you. That's the right one. Page 91. Yes, the regional transport policy update. Thank you.
And again, this is another information report, just making sure everyone around the table is up to speed with various pieces of national direction that are either being worked on or recently released or under consultation or soon to be under consultation, just really to raise awareness that there is quite a lot happening in the transport space, and then we will need to be aware of it and familiar with and understand the implications when it comes time to develop that regional land transport plan. So again, really just an awareness raising, so you know that these things are happening, and that there may be opportunity to either provide informal or more formal feedback submissions depending on the particular topic. So just to be aware of that. And if there is anything in there that you do particularly think council should be preparing a submission on, or the RTC should be preparing a submission on, then to let us know.
Any questions? Moved Councillor Akita Brown. Seconded Councillor Burdett. I just wondered, I have a question on page 94, and not inconsistent with other discussion we've had. What about rural businesses who have significant road use issues? And how, this relates to the first box in the spatial plan, how has their input been sourced? I mean, we just have to look at the front page of the Gisborne Herald last night. So how has the input from significant rural businesses been sourced for the spatial plan?
We did invite business to attend workshops, meetings. Engagement was not high, I will admit. Eastland Wood Council were involved, but the farming community were represented in terms of the workshops and in the feedback that we have received, both informally and in terms of formal submissions. The horticultural industry has been represented. And the engagement.
Anybody from the Waikato Valley?
I would have to go back and check.
Right, thank you. Okay, we understand the process, and so that's a good update. It's been moved and seconded. The paper is for noting. I will put it to the meeting. All those in favour, please say aye. Yes, Journeys operational and capital updates report. Thank you. Ms MacArthur and Mr Hadfield, thank you. Have you got a PowerPoint presentation or not?
No, we've just come to take any
questions? Just talk to me about the interaction. It might be Mr Wilson, but project details, finances and risks will be discussed in detail at Council's Operations Committee. Sort of what level of overlap or how is that process going to be managed? This committee will get none of that detail because it will all go to the Operations Committee. So where does it leave the public who we invite to be community reps on this committee?
So through you, Madam Chair, the split in the committees is set out by the Mayor. We will do our quarterly reporting for our financials and our performance tracking. So our annual plan performing and our quarterly financial tracking will go to operations as opposed to coming through to this committee going forward. As it did last year, it went to assets, last triennium it went to assets and infrastructure. That level of detail sits in the operations.
Thank you. And with respect to the Provincial Growth Fund, is there the next allocation of fund, this is 9 on page 101, the next allocation of funding will only become available when the business cases are delivered. And we've read earlier in reports today that the business cases are being prepared. And we did ask that there's some report next year, but what's the timing and is there any risk around any of that money? Some bridges were going to be reported in March, I think I heard you say.
Yes, the business cases have to be delivered before we can access any potential fund.
Yes.
So
is there a degree of urgency being applied to the business cases?
There is, but we still have to do a good job instead of a.
Oh, but we've known that for how long? 18 months?
No, but the funding only became available for us to start the NLTP in the last, when the PGF was initially announced.
How long ago was that?
So was it August?
Through you, Madam Chair, the funding for the business cases only became available this financial year because Council front foots the bill for the business cases as we do for any business case that we do. So Council pays for the business cases. We started that process in July of this year when we had our consultants appointed and we've been working through those. When we say business case, just to clarify for those new to the committee, the business case is not just whether or not we should do something, but it's how we should do it too. It's the designs and it's actually making sure that it's worthy of investment. So it's a really important step, particularly for these projects, around making sure that we have adequate business cases to unlock funding. They're a treasury requirement. We refer to them as NZTA business cases, but that's just because we submit them to NZTA, but they're an all-of-government process that we all need to follow.
Quite right. We understand and we would expect there to be a high level of accountability over the money. At the end of the day, it is taxpayers' money, but we also want to see money granted to Tairāwhiti able to be spent in Tairāwhiti. It's a comprehensive report. Do you have any questions?
Okay. Chair, in terms of, well, either David over there, in terms of the business cases that you put up, do you get many questions? Is there a time lag between the time they accept the proposal to when the money is delivered? This is for all our projects that are with the Provincial Growth Fund, I presume.
So I might speak to that one if that's right, David, you can talk about the process. So the way that we have our projects that we have under our provincial growth funding, they're part funded. There's only a couple that are 100% provincial growth funded. There are also others that require NZTA investment as well. When we put them up to cabinet through to either NZTA or PGF, they're quite quick turnarounds. We're talking about next construction season, we would be able to do most of the works. These are not small jobs that we're proposing to go forward with. So they are significant amounts of work that we'll then schedule in with our contractors and going.
So supplementary, Madam Chair, the 136 mil, I think that's the right figure, that Shane Jones delivered, will we be able to access that via the business case before the next election?
Depending on the outcomes of the business cases, we will know most of those by February, March of next year, which we will then put into the pipeline for funding to be able to draw down that big jobs, and it'll be how those are then drawn down as to the contractor availability, the resourcing, but we will know the outcomes well before the election next year.
Thank you.
Yes, certainly.
Just a query. I appreciate the report. Thank you. Bullet point number 4 just notes that you're tracking along nicely. Any unforeseen or any concerns, risks that could perhaps hit that tracking along nicely, knowing full well whether all sorts of issues arise, and we seem to always be very grateful at the time it's going well. But just if you've got any concerns, issues that could come up.
Thank you, through the chair. So at the moment, we are, as I said, tracking very nicely for the operational maintenance budgets, BAU, as well as the emergency works. Emergency works to date to the end of October, which is 1 month following after this, we've spent $2.2 million of a $10 million budget. We've just started our actual construction season. So at this point in time, unless there's anything unforeseen, as in major weather events or lags with contractors being able to achieve the works program, which at this point there's been no indication that that would be the case, we're very confident.
Anything further? Oh, I'm just checking my numbers. It's 99. No, I've turned the page over. I thought I'd gone too fast. It's page 9. Recommendations are on page 99. And there's a note in the report. Are you happy to move, Councillor Brown? Seconded, Councillor Burdett. All those in favour say aye. Contrary carried. Where's? Yes, I know. Where's no Richard? Emma. Where's that? Can I just ask something I should have noted before, Ms. Spate? We don't seem to have an agenda item from you, but I would have expected normally that you do have. Yes, exactly. Fine. Yeah, well, I just. But, yes, that's right. But it's been loaded as the news. It's been loaded as my report. When I go to look at that, it's the report that I've made. Page. That's where we're getting to. On 122 is just a paper that I've suggested that we have a more comprehensive reporting. So, so it's not. We don't have specific terminology that. I beg your pardon? Exactly. Yeah, sorry, but that's what and I didn't pick it up at home. I'm only picking that up now. So we'll move to page 122, which. Yes, of course you do. Yeah, and take mine there. I move to page 122, which is just a report that I have written, and Ms. Spate and myself and Ms. Kohiri have discussed it, that we will come up with a work plan through the year that will give much more specifics. Thank you, Mr. Hadfield. Come up with specifics so that we have more detailed progress, reporting on projects during the year. So I'd just like to move that, note the content of that report. Any questions? Is there a seconder? Thank you, Mr. Burdett. Councillor Burdett. Moved myself, seconded Councillor Burdett. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. Thank you very much. We'll now move to a report from NZTA. Thank you, Ms. Spate.
Okay, so we'll start with the most important thing, which is working together. This is something that Commissioner said has been really focused on, is that we've been doing a lot of behind the scenes work to start some new regional relationship teams will focus on the relationship that we have with our investors and on really investing time and ensuring we will have good clarity about who's in the team, and what our goals are for that relationship. Now, we know that in that relationship, there will always be things that potentially councils will want that are not possible to fund, but that it's important that our relationship remains really strong, high trust, and that we can engage communication on those things. And so this is what we're going to be working on. So they are very new, but you'll be pleased to know that key people like those things and Helen Harris are members of that team, and we'll be bringing that local knowledge and relationship into it, and we'll have a couple of people who will know about members who will be participating in that team, and once we have those operational, we'll bring those up to the team so that we can actually share and establish our shared goals. So that's been a real priority for us. Moving to the business, we've talked a bit about this today, is the new guidelines on the ARLTs. And so what we've heard from councils and what we've experienced ourselves is that there is quite a lot of variation in that councils have been seeking some greater guidance, examples, and visibility about what we're doing and what works really well. And so that's what TSIC is doing today, moving through that. What we're also looking at is trying to ensure that we use TIO as well as we can online, which is our tool for tracking and monitoring those activities. And so that one of the really important things about us and nationally is each council forecasts what they think they're going to spend a year, and everyone's optimistic. And what happens is things don't happen as fast as likely to. And that's a range of reasons why that happens, weather and other events in the region and priority, or planning processes. And the better we're able to work on updating the better the more utilisation of what's shown. So it's a really important thing is to aggregate that up nationally across 78 priorities. It's actually quite a big number. So we really wanted to encourage that to work well. We also wanted to make sure that our are addressed, developed, informed with good understanding of where there's available funding, so that we don't end up putting a whole lot of effort into long lists of things that are never going to be able to be funded because there simply isn't the scale of investment available. So we want to send some really good, strong signals on that early as well, and so that everyone can use their investment as well as they can. So we'll have those dates coming out. So
Is it relevant? This page that's in our agenda has got 2020 and it's about the regional land transport plan. So I think we've all got a draft. of-
yeah. So that's the overarching timeline
At
for it.
page 90 of our agenda, if you want to look at it. Right, thank you.
And so as we go through that, there are some of the key dates, other key inputs will relate to the new government policy statement and other things as well. One of the things that's a bit new in the system is Arataki. Arataki is our 10-year plan, the Transport Agency's 10-year plan of our view on what's needed for the transport system. And we have done longer term plans previously, and this is a new iteration of it. And it's about being very open and transparent about what we are seeing as the key issues right across the country, and putting that out in the public arena so that that's considered as an input to RLTPs. It's not the priorities for an RLTP. It's our view on what the long-term issues and opportunities are across the country. So we're going to be coming out to talk to local government about that, because we're interested in whether we've missed something really important for a region, whether we have, if we've got a different view, in which case we might have a discussion about that. We might keep a different view, but we might end up with a aligned view. But we want to be able to have those conversations early. And so we will come out and talk to you about that, and we'll probably update and change that through next year as we see the new government policy statement draft come out, and see what's coming through in the RLTPs, and if we change our view as part of that. So that's a new plank to the system. Also really important is the investment decision-making framework. So we've been moving through looking at how do we make decisions in a way that ensures we're taking into account information, evidence that aligns to government priority statement. And so that's been a process we've worked through over the last year. And we're going to be going through another round of consultation following the release of our document in December. And that really, because there's been quite a significant change in government policy, the inclusion of much more focus on safety, on access, on environmental factors, we needed to update our decision-making frameworks to really ensure that we were appropriately capturing those.
So that consultation referred to in the last bullet point there, is that consultation with councils or wider? Is that like consultation with the community like we're doing now? Or is it just coming out to consult with councils if it's on funding?
It's been primarily with councils.
Yeah, no, that's fine, because otherwise they'll get consulted to death if it's not meaningful to the community.
And then the other important thing that we are working on is our transport agency investment proposal. So this is again an input that we put to the RLTP process, which essentially says what's in the State Highway Activity Management Plan and the other key activities that we're looking for investment for over the course of the RLTP. So again, that's an input, that's our part of the input process to RLTP, and then we'll be, but we will be engaging with the sector.
Can I just ask council officers, then how are we going to feed into that process? If between January and March, we're expected to, one presumes, have information to provide to NZTA on priorities for investment. So what's the process around that, please? And what about, how does it factor on the State Highway
That is about the state highway, yeah.
So what would we expect to happen to enable Gisborne District Council to be in a position to feed into that constructively, having discussed it as all councillors and council officers by March?
So through the chair, there is 12 weeks is enough for us to be able to compile a response to that. Obviously, once we have more visibility of it, we'll amend the timeframes in front of you in the previous report and figure out how we're going to deliver. We don't want to hold up things and want to participate meaningfully. So it's one of those things, when we get the timeframes, we look at how we can respond appropriately and within the timeframes.
Thank you. Thank you. Back to you, Ms.
Okay, so speed management, we've already talked quite a bit about this. So in terms of this is the broad context for it. So the government has asked us to focus immediately on reducing speeds in the top 10% on the high-risk parts of the network, both state highway and local road. And so that's obviously something we're really focused on, and we're investing around 1.4 billion in projects that will contribute to improving safety, but also looking at speed, both in particular locations, but across the network as a whole. And in terms of this region, you're very familiar that we have Gisborne to Tapuia, and then Tapuia to Opotiki, and that we're moving to engagement on, and we're currently in consultation on the townships from Gisborne to Tapuia. I think we've had some really great engagement and feedback. Those hui are one really important mechanism, but there are websites, there's social pinpoint, there's lots of ways that people can have their input, raise issues, and participate in that discussion. And we hope to get some really good changes that we can then take through the formal process.
Can I just ask now, are you asking for feedback at these drop-in meetings around passing bays? And I see you've got it in there. Are you asking and encouraging people to make feedback? Great.
So we have two related pieces of work that we use in the same consultation process for. So those two related pieces of work are the resilience projects and the passing opportunities. So we don't want to fatigue the community with requests to come and talk to us all the time. So we're trying those.
No, that's great. Thank you.
And that's the map of the proposals for the townships that people are providing feedback on. Public transport fare policy changes. I know that we have relatively limited public transport up here, but we are having a review of this. The government has, particularly in the major metropolitan areas, is wanting to see significant load shift to public transport and active modes. And one of the things that we're looking at is what is the right fare policy, both nationally and in particular regions, and the balance between fare box recovery, the shares paid for by councils and by central government. So that's a review that we're looking at, and I don't have a date, but it was introduced in 2010, so it's important to have a look at that now, and they haven't told me exactly when that finishes, but we'll keep you posted on that. Another really important activity is our supporting road patrol. I remember when my daughters used to do this. Some of the horrifying behaviour you saw people dropping kids off at school. But anyway, this is, we've updated our information and training and information to have available to schools, and making sure that that's really taken on board the latest knowledge about what's needed to keep things safe. Moving to the region, as you've had an update on the council managed PGF projects, we also have a set of those PGF projects as well. And most of these ones are the longer term ones, the 2 to 5 year package of activity. And so what we're showing here for those with the HPMV bridges, we've completed the business case. We've got 5 projects that are proposed for NLTF funding, and we're just going through the processes to get those funding approved for those, and then we can go to tender. State Highway 35 Resilience, we're underway with business case and the consultant, which is happening right now. We've got a prioritised list of sites. Again, we've got business case due to be completed in March, and we're also concurrently doing the planning so that we can fast track construction of some of those sites. Makamuka realignment, we're in the cultural impact assessment phase of that one, which may lead to some final changes to those designs, and then we'll be looking to get on and commit to the construction for that one. State Highway 235 passing opportunities, again, we're in consultation on the sites that have been identified, and we've also got 8 sites that we've identified that can be fast-tracked to construction once we've completed that business case. And finally, State Highway 2 Waikato Gorge, again, we're in consultation on that one. We've completed survey and geotechnical work, and had a community meeting on the 13th, and we're just working through to get that business case completed in April. That is a very significant project. It is moving the road to a new alignment, quite separate to where it currently goes down and crosses the river. So that was one that was identified as a 5-year project.
Can we ask about those before you go off that page?
Sure.
Do you want to ask anything, Councillor Arkada-Brown? Councillor Burdett? Oh, sure. I'd just like to ask, is the Waikari Bridge a substantial bridge like the other gorge on State Highway 2? Is that what's proposed?
Well, the road moves quite significantly, so there will be a new bridge as part of that.
And did you have positive consultation on the 13th?
Yeah, I think it was really good.
Going well. Great. Fantastic. Yeah. Can I ask, do we know whether the south end of Tokomara Bay is amongst the passing lanes in your State Highway 35 passing lanes? I mean, it's been mentioned around here before. Coming out of Tokomara Bay going south, is a passing lane proposed on that long hill? Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Can I just be clear though, that these will probably be slow vehicle bays, not passing lanes per se. So what we have to, for safety reasons, what we need to be quite careful about how we construct and design these, and what we find in a lot of these areas, and particularly where we've got constrained lengths, and particularly when those larger vehicles are going slower up hills, a slow vehicle bay is a safer option. So
still gets them off out of the lane,
but it allows people to pass.
As you see other parts of the region. I've just been driving back from Hamilton lately, and so I was always wondering why. But I know our region geologically is constrained and has huge issues as far as movement, etc. But obviously safety is paramount, so slower lanes it will be then.
And then we have a couple of National Land Transport funded project updates. So we've got the southern approach to the Motu Bridge due to be completed before Christmas. Drove through that today. It's quite a substantial piece of work. And the Gladstone Bridge and Wainui shared path, all the final safety, all that, closing out those projects.
The Motu Bridge, the ongoing work that you just mentioned, is that all covered off in that whole cost, or is this, it hasn't come as extra costings, that work?
Yeah, the approach, but we had to phase those construction components. So that's why it sort of seems to have gone on for quite a long time. But, the bridge itself was always going to be completed in advance of doing those works. And state highway maintenance updates. We're in consultation, contract negotiations with Downers to this 1 December sign up, going through to October 2022. And then we have summer construction season with quite a large program of maintenance works underway. So lane resealing and rehabilitation. Those things are quite disruptive, we're conscious of that. And there'll be a lot of that underway between now and Christmas, and then obviously we take a bit of a break and get the rest of it done after summer.
Can we, with that piece of work at Puawa, can we please make sure that our Freedom campers can still access the Freedom camping site? Because the road has been built up quite substantially on the northern end of that area that's been dug up. And beg your pardon? I'm sure, but it still is quite a lot higher than, they're not going to be able to drive off in the various places that they were able to drive off previously, campers and day trippers and Freedom campers. So we just need to make sure we make safe access points for our holiday makers, please.
Madam Chair, in terms of the summer maintenance program on State Highway 35, Kororoa Hill, what are the plans there? Dave's familiar with it because I used to give him a real ear bashing about it. It's a mess. And there's two places, but it's not his business. This is now transport agency. And surely you're not going to leave it like that. Really, this is the second winter. It leaves every winter.
We know, we live here.
It leaves every winter. So I'll have to come back to you with what's proposed.
It is quite urgent and serious, Oliver. It's a mess. I mean, the ones that have driven the road know that. It's quite a length of metal been sitting there and just gets topped up and drained occasionally. Further down, see they've filled a few potholes in over the last couple of days, but that's not the answer. Anyway, you're the experts, you fill us attend to it.
Thank you. Thank you. Is
That
that all?
completes the presentation.
Oh, thank you very much. Now, any questions for Ms. Spate? Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Burdett?
Obviously we've got an election, foreseen changes to the NZTA space, in that space of governance, and yeah, anything perhaps in that space. I'm just intrigued.
A long way away. Yeah.
Always happens, with regard to election.
We obviously have a very big program of work in terms of the statutory requirements every 3 years to review the RLTP and sort of develop a new National Land Transport program. And we work very closely in terms of understanding where the government policy statement will be, because we'll have drafts of that throughout next year. And we're always conscious that with a change in government, there may be changes to government priorities, and they will come through quite quickly and need to be reflected quite quickly both in the government policy statement and the regional land transport plans, so that the National Land Transport Program is able to take all of that into account. So we will be planning and working with the council quite closely on what happens post-election if there is any change to government priorities. And so we'll have contingency plans in place for that, and we'll just deal with it as it happens.
Thank you. I was given a couple of other questions and photographs by the mayor. So and it's probably Oliver for this one. The intersection with Wainui Road and the Esplanade, while the work was being done on the bridge, there are still some little red markers sitting in the middle of the road that have been there for an awful long time. Are you able to give us a time frame on when they will be removed, please?
The same orders thrown up, that they're probably safer to be kept in mind, stop the right turn out.
Or can they be made tidy? Because the photograph, I haven't bought, well, I have got the photograph here on my iPad, but I'm sure you don't need me to show it to you. That it just looks like it was put there 6 months ago. The odd one's been bumped. I think there's a couple of sandbags holding something up and it all looks pretty untidy. So could we please have that, if it is to stay there for some time, could we please be advised and it just be kept looking a little tidier? And the matter of the painting of the offside of the bridge, can I have some assurance that you will take it back as a project? Because it's been asked about at this meeting before, in the last triennium several times. And again, it was on the list that the mayor gave me to ask of NZTA today.
We will look at it, but it's not necessarily going to become a project. We do have to balance up the requirements in terms of it being a heritage bridge, but also on whether it is a priority. You know, keeping it clean and safe is absolutely important, but going through a process to get permission to paint it may not be something that's a priority for us.
So we're allowed to have one half that looks like one thing and the other half looks completely different, and that's okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So just on that though, because it has been raised obviously by a number of people, if the process isn't a priority to the agency, but became a community noted priority, would the process be then for I'm talking about volunteers who are prepared to go and buy paint and paint it themselves? Would they have to approach you?
It is our asset, and we do have to look after it in accordance with the rules, the heritage agreements on it. And obviously then painting requires an ongoing maintenance and commitment of funding to do that. So we take all of that into account in making those decisions. So we will take that into account and make a decision.
But I imagine you needed to get approval to have the other side painted, the heritage aspect of it.
We had to go through a full process with the heritage people to get permission to make any changes at all to the structure.
Thank you. I have no further business. Do you have any further business?
Yeah, no, okay for the agency, Judge's Hill above ticketing, been repaired. The contractors did a very good job, so well done.
Thank you, Bill.
Councillor Arkhart-Brown, do you have anything further? Nothing further from me, thank you. Have we missed anything? Harry? No. Thank you very much. We appreciate you both being here, and we'll have a conversation before the next meeting around some project timeframes or information timeframes. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, everybody.